My years on this subcommittee, I've never felt as frustrated as I do at this moment. And one of the points of frustration is the request that I've made directly to expect a Senate-confirmed appointee to testify today, someone who can provide answers but also take responsibility for the failure to pay out Chapter 35 benefits on time. We don't have that. While I recognize that VBA doesn't have a confirmed
Thousands of veterans' children and spouses pursuing college dreams on hard-earned benefits suddenly face empty bank accounts, risking eviction, lost childcare, or dropped classes, all because a tech glitch and months of silence from the VA left them in the dark. Is this the promise we make to those who've sacrificed the most?
Remarks as well.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for pinch hitting with this subcommittee today, and thank you to our witnesses for joining. This is a critically overdue hearing today, and in all my years on this subcommittee, I've never felt as frustrated as I do at this moment. And one of the points of frustration is the request that I've made directly to expect a Senate-confirmed appointee to testify today, someone who can provide answers but also take responsibility for the failure to pay out Chapter 35 benefits on time. We don't have that. While I recognize that VBA doesn't have a confirmed undersecretary, it's abundantly clear from VA's stonewalling to multiple congressional inquiries and its written testimony that this administration has no intention of taking responsibility and instead is trying to shift our attention and the blame onto the previous administration. Our veterans and VA beneficiaries deserve a lot better. Forget about pointing fingers. VA responsibility is to serve veterans. When mistakes or unexpected developments occur, VA also has a responsibility to communicate with those same veterans. And veterans expect VA to work with Congress to solve the problem. As I've always said on this subcommittee, congressional oversight is important regardless of who is in the White House, which is why, Mr. Chairman, we and our veterans have come to expect public and involved supervision of what VA is doing or not doing, no matter which administration is in charge. We have not had that. In fact, in all my years on this committee, I've never experienced this level of stonewalling before. The Trump administration and its VA have deliberately failed to communicate with Congress, and more importantly, the affected beneficiaries, as they try to hide the mess that's been months in the making. VA has issued little to no public acknowledgement for months about the 75,000 beneficiaries whose benefits have been delayed. There have been minimal communications for months to schools and beneficiaries themselves. And there's been zero communication with Congress, unless you can count the letter that we received back that didn't answer our questions at 5:45 yesterday. 3 letters that were sent from members of this committee that went unanswered for a month and a half. In fact, VA officials refused to formally acknowledge this problem until a briefing on December 5th. That's December 5th. VA knew in September that it had a problem because they sent requirements to Accenture to try to address the backlog. It took 4 months between this problem being identified and Congress being updated. 4 months, during which tens of thousands of beneficiaries were left without any information. There's just no excuse for an egregious lack of communication around an issue that affects so many veterans. Any reasonable person would conclude that a deliberate political decision was made to cut off communications with Congress and veterans to avoid accountability and to hide the problem. VA continues to refer to the problem simply as a tech issue or a glitch, yet contradicts itself in written testimony. Now, I'm glad that the ranking member of the Tech Mod Subcommittee, Ms. Baczynski, could join us today, along with Mr. Barrett, to explore that issue. A glitch implies a malfunction. There was no glitch. The software worked as expected. VA's planning factors and assumptions were wrong. VA failed to validate the assumptions and failed to react when things did not go as planned. Now, the real glitch, the real malfunction here is VA's unprecedented failure to communicate with beneficiaries, the public, and Congress. This administration and its VA can try to misdirect our attention by blaming the previous administration, but let's do a quick review. The decision to conduct data reconciliation by hand in 2024 was due to VA cultural distrust of automation and the accuracy of the information in the databases. This has not changed between administrations. Now, regardless of how we got here, Secretary Collins' VA was in charge in August when things began to spiral, and throughout the last few months of ignoring veteran and congressional inquiries. For example, the decision to shift to automate some of the claims reconciliation and processing only occurred once VA was late on 75,000 claims and was looking for any possible help. So regardless of what the previous administration set forth, VA could and should have tested the data reconciliation process to validate the assumptions on the time that it would take. June or July would have been great for that to occur. The Trump VA can point to planning that took place in December 2024, but they came in and continued that plan. The absence of decision-making or oversight for 9 months is just as damning as the original planning. VA failed to follow guidance from the White House on who to furlough during the government shutdown. Government employees working on funded programs like these mandatory VA education benefits were direct to work. Yet the information technology staff needed to test and field the automation updates were furloughed and not brought back until the day before the shutdown ended. Worst of all, this administration made the decision not to communicate with veterans, families, and survivors impacted for 4 months. People in our districts were in the dark about what was going on and why their benefits were not getting paid. One of my constituents from Manchester contacted our office and said, quote, "Due to an error with the VA benefits system, I have not received my education benefits so far this semester. The call-in line that I and the University of New Hampshire Veterans Center staff use to resolve such issues has been deactivated for the duration of the shutdown, leaving me dead in the water. My wife's salary has so far covered our rent and food, but we're at risk of losing childcare for my son due to non-payment as well as having to miss car payments," end quote. The financial stress put on him and his family is evident. It's also unacceptable. We've been elected to advocate on behalf of our constituents, yet VA refuses to do its most basic job and ignores our inquiries for months. I think we all agree that veterans and their families and their survivors deserve so much better, and we deserve bipartisan advocacy on their behalf when government fails to uphold its promise and deliver the benefits they've earned. The only question is, will we in Congress hold the administration, like any other administration, responsible for fulfilling that promise? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
A blistering congressional hearing where lawmakers blasted the Department of Veterans Affairs for its handling of a massive backlog in Chapter 35 education benefits, monthly stipends for survivors and dependents of disabled or deceased veterans. In a rare display of bipartisan fury, the chair accused the Trump VA of deliberate stonewalling, hiding a crisis affecting over 75,000 students while pointing fingers at the past. This isn't abstract bureaucracy, it's families like one New Hampshire veteran's, his wife covering rent alone, at risk of losing childcare, left desperate without word from VA for months. If breakdowns like this, shining light on broken promises to our heroes, hit home for you, smash that subscribe button now. We're dedicated to holding power accountable and honoring those who served. The hearing erupted with frustration from the chair, a longtime subcommittee member declaring he'd never seen such stonewalling. No Senate-confirmed VA leader testified, despite direct requests, to own the mess or answer tough questions. Instead, lower officials faced the heat over delayed payments for survivors and dependents' educational assistance, DEA, known as Chapter 35. These benefits provide up to $1,574 monthly, full-time rate for 2025-2026, for tuition, housing, books, lifelines for spouses and kids of 100% disabled or fallen veterans. Educative at core, Chapter 35 offers up to 45 months of support, distinct from post-9/11 GI Bill transfers, focusing on direct stipends to ease education burdens. Humanizing, beneficiaries aren't extras, they're carrying legacies, like retired Air Force Sergeant Adam Stump's daughter Natalie, approved in August but unpaid months later, straining family finances. The crisis ignited in August 2025 when VA switched to a new claims system. Automation failed, halting payments. By October, over 75,000 affected, per veterans groups like TAPS. A government shutdown furloughed key IT staff, worsening the backlog. Manual processing needed, but experts sidelined. VA knew issues by September, contracting fixes, yet waited until December 5 briefing to inform Congress. 4 months of silence. 3 bipartisan letters ignored for weeks, responses evasive. Chair's outrage? Deliberate political decision to cut off communications, to hide the problem. Insight? Not a glitch. Software worked as designed, but flawed planning/assumptions on volume/time caused spiral. VA's distrust of automation lingered from prior admin, but Trump VA continued without testing. June/July validation missed. Human stories pierced the testimony. One Manchester constituent, benefits vanished mid-semester, hotline deactivated during shutdown. Dead in the water, wife covering essentials, risking childcare or car payments. Universities like George Mason notified delays, schools urged patience while offering aid. Bipartisan calls rang, oversight essential regardless of White House, yet VA's minimal outreach, no public alerts months, and congressional ghosting eroded trust. Chair, VA responsibility is to serve veterans, communicate when mistakes occur. Blame shifting to Biden era dismissed, Trump VA owned escalation, ignoring inquiries. Insight? Mandatory benefits funded advance, payments shouldn't stop, but processing breakdowns do. Shutdown closed GI Bill hotline, SCO support, certification stalled. VA promised retroactive full pay, but silence fueled despair. Educative, DEA distinct, monthly stipends, not tuition direct, rates tiered, full-time $1,574, half $912. Delays hit hardest low-income survivors. If accountability for heroes' kin matters, subscribe now. We humanize policy's real pain. Deeper frustration? VA called it tech issue, but testimony contradicted. Planning flaws, unvalidated assumptions, no proactive testing, automation shift reactive amid 75,000 backlog. Furloughs ignored White House guidance, accepted staff for mandatory programs sidelined. Closing blaze? Hearing exposed VA's communication collapse. 75,000 plus students unpaid months. Families frayed. Silence deliberate? Bipartisan demand, accountability now, no finger pointing. With shutdown ended, payments resuming retroactively, but scars linger. Human stakes? Sky high. Survivors pursuing futures on promises earned in blood. Will VA rebuild trust? What angers you most, silence or delays? Comment, like if moved, subscribe for unrelenting veteran advocacy. We humanize policy's real pain. Thanks. Stay strong, America.